There's a moment in every person's life when they realize something profound, something that changes everything. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, almost invisible. But it's the moment they stop explaining themselves. They stop justifying, stop defending, stop apologizing for who they are. And the second that happens, everything shifts. People treat them differently. Opportunities appear. Respect follows. Today, I want to tell you about the day one man learned this lesson and why it might be the most powerful thing you ever hear. His name was James, 35 years old, living in Chicago. A good man, the kind of person everyone liked. Polite, thoughtful, always willing to help. But if you ask James how he really felt, he'd tell you he was exhausted. Not from working too hard, but from explaining too much. Every decision he made, he felt the need to justify. When he set a boundary at work, he'd write a 3-paragraph email explaining why. When he said no to family events, he'd list 5 reasons so no one would be upset. When he chose to spend time alone instead of going out, he'd apologize like he'd committed a crime. He lived his entire life walking on eggshells, afraid someone might misunderstand, afraid someone might judge, afraid someone might think less of him. And so he explained, and explained, and explained, until one day, something broke. It started with a simple conversation. James had been dating someone for 8 months, a woman named Sarah. She was great, kind, successful, but James knew, deep down, it wasn't right. There was no spark, no future, just comfort. And he needed to end it. So one evening, he sat her down, and he said, "I think we should go our separate ways." Sarah looked at him and asked, "Why?" And James froze, because he didn't have a reason that would satisfy her. He wasn't angry. She hadn't done anything wrong. He didn't feel it. But how do you explain that without sounding cruel? So he started talking. He listed reasons. He softened his words. He apologized for how he felt. He talked for 20 minutes straight, trying to make her understand, trying to make her okay with it. And when he finally stopped, Sarah looked at him and said something that hit him like a truck. "James, you don't need my permission to leave. You're allowed to just want something different." And in that moment, James realized something. He'd lived his entire life seeking approval for his choices, for his feelings, for his existence, as if he needed the world to sign off on every decision before he was allowed to make it. That conversation changed James. Not overnight, but slowly. He started noticing how much energy he wasted explaining himself. At work, his boss asked him to take on a project outside his role. Old James would have said, "I really appreciate you thinking of me and I'd love to help, but I'm currently managing 3 other deadlines and I don't think I'd be able to give this the attention it deserves. Plus, I've been trying to maintain better work-life balance and my family really needs me right now. So I hope you understand." New James said, "I won't be able to take that on." That's it. No essay, no guilt, no performance, just a clear boundary. And you know what happened? His boss said, "Okay, I'll ask someone else." No drama, no fallout, no consequences. Because the truth is, most people don't need your reasons. They just need your answer. At family gatherings, his mom would guilt trip him. "Why don't you visit more? Are we not important to you? What's so busy in your life that you can't make time for family?" Old James would spiral. He'd list his schedule, defend his priorities, apologize for being a bad son. New James said, "I love you, Mom. I'll visit when I can." And then he stopped talking. His mom tried to push, tried to guilt him further, but James didn't bite. He didn't justify, didn't argue, didn't explain. And eventually, she let it go. Because when you stop defending yourself, there's nothing left to attack. Over the next few months, James noticed something incredible. People respected him more. Not because he became rude, not because he stopped caring, but because he stopped performing. See, when you constantly explain yourself, people sense it. They sense your need for approval. And subconsciously, they lose respect for you. Because strong people don't need to justify their choices. They make decisions and move forward. They trust themselves. And when you trust yourself, others start to trust you too. James started getting promotions at work, not because he worked harder, but because he stopped people-pleasing. He said no to things that weren't his responsibility. He focused on what mattered, and his clarity made him more valuable. In relationships, he became a magnet. Women were suddenly more attracted to him, not because he played games, but because he had self-respect. He didn't chase, didn't beg for attention, didn't explain why he deserved love. He just existed in his worth. And that's magnetic. Even friendships changed. The people who only liked him because he always said yes, they faded away. And the ones who respected him, they stayed. Because real relationships aren't built on your ability to please. They're built on mutual respect. And you can't have respect without self-respect. So here's what James learned. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your power. Because every time you justify your choices to someone who didn't ask, you're giving them authority over your life. You're saying, I need you to approve of this before I can proceed. And that's exhausting. It's also a trap, because no matter how much you explain, some people still won't understand. Some people will still be upset. And if you base your choices on their approval, you'll never be free. But when you stop explaining, when you simply say, this is my decision, and move forward, you send a message, not just to others, but to yourself. You say, I trust me. I don't need the world to agree with my choices. I'm allowed to want what I want. I'm allowed to feel what I feel. I'm allowed to live my life on my terms. And that's not arrogance. That's self-respect. Now let me be clear. Stopping explaining yourself doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean refusing to communicate. It doesn't mean shutting people out. If someone genuinely asks for understanding, you can share. If someone deserves an explanation, give it. But the key word is deserves. Not everyone is entitled to know your reasons. Not everyone needs to understand your choices. Not everyone gets a vote in your life. Your boss doesn't need to know your personal struggles to accept your no. Your family doesn't need a thesis to respect your boundaries. Your friends don't need an apology for living your life. You are allowed to exist without a defense. You are allowed to choose without a trial. You are allowed to be without an explanation. So here's what I want you to do. Starting today, practice this. When someone questions your decision, pause. Before you launch into a 10-minute justification, ask yourself, do they actually need to know? Or am I just afraid of their judgment? If it's the second one, keep it simple. That doesn't work for me. I've decided to go a different direction. I'm not available for that. No essay, no defense, no apology. Just clarity. At first, it'll feel uncomfortable. You might feel rude, selfish, cold. That's normal, because you've been conditioned to believe that boundaries are mean. But they're not. Boundaries are respect for yourself
and for others. When you stop over-explaining, you stop wasting their time too. You stop making them responsible for validating your choices. You set them free to make their own decisions about how they feel. And you set yourself free to live. James never became famous. He didn't write a book or start a podcast. He just lived differently, with more peace, more confidence, more self-respect. And the people who mattered, they stayed. The people who didn't, they left. And he was okay with that, because he finally understood you can't control how people feel about you. You can't make everyone understand. You can't live your life seeking permission from the world, but you can choose yourself.
You can trust yourself. You can stop explaining and start living. So today, ask yourself, where are you over-explaining? Where are you justifying your existence? Where are you apologizing for taking up space? And what would happen if you just stopped? What would happen if you said what you meant, set your boundary, and walked away in peace? You might lose some people, but you'll gain something far more valuable, yourself, and that's worth everything. The day you stop explaining yourself. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. Please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe this channel.